Alright, so I stayed up last night. I finished season 3 of Phineas and Ferb, finished season 4 today. I don't remember the series actually getting this bad towards the end, but the show just went on way too long. It was just too long. How do I start with this? So, everybody knows the Phineas and Ferb formula, but why it worked in season 1 is because they were playing around with it a lot and they weren't just sticking to that formula completely. And when they did, they tried to have some nifty interventions or like playing around with the jokes and fourth wall breaks and things like that. So it made the episodes where they did the formula more enjoyable. This season, these last 2 seasons, they just stick to that formula completely. And there are some episodes where, okay, you're like, yeah, okay, you're playing around with it a little bit. Like that episode that just focuses on Perry and Dr. Doofenshmirtz stopping an evil villain. Or other stories like that within these seasons. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of the episodes are kind of poorly paced. They go on way too long, and I'm just like, okay, I've been watching the show for 4 seasons now. Please stop. And I feel like the show should have ended after season 2. It's clear that the writers were kind of getting on burnout. They were tired of writing the same stories. And they just didn't know how to make them interesting anymore. There was that Fun and Meep episode in season 3, but besides that, I can't really think of any highlights through season 3. That weird storyline with Eva or Carl was not a highlight at all. You know, the specials were even starting to get worse. And the last episode, The Last Day of Summer, was just so insanely boring. I hated that episode. I don't understand this show. And they got worse and worse about pacing the actual specials. And some of the specials were just kind of weird and lame. Like the Marvel one. The Marvel one was alright, but like, why Marvel? It just doesn't make sense, right? With the Star Wars one, you can tell they were fans. They were playing around with the Star Wars one. But with the Marvel one, you can tell they really didn't know anything about it. And it just got boring and boring. It just got worse and worse and worse. And it never reached the heights of season 2. And I think the main reason for that is focusing on Phineas and Ferb. Now, I know they're the main characters, but the side characters are way better characters. And when you show those side characters more often, it makes the show more enjoyable because you can play around with the formula a little bit more, right? And you can also play, and you know, think about Dr. Doofenshmirtz and Perry the Platypus. Those characters, you see them, and man, it sounds so weird saying Perry the Platypus. It sounds like I'm trying to say a joke, but I'm not. Being serious. I never joke about Phineas and Ferb. But when you see those storylines, they play around with those characters the most, and they have the most jokes and fun with those characters. And when you just focus on these characters who were never really the spotlight of season 2, the best season. They were in it and they had their own side stories just like in every episode of the show, but they weren't the main focus of of those episodes. It was just, I mean, they were in it, but even the episodes that focus on their side plot, it's usually like, oh, we're helping Baljeet, and then Baljeet has an interesting story. Buford has an interesting story. I don't know. But it just got boring. And I think it's just because if you watch the show the way I did where I binged it, the show gets really repetitive really fast because it is the same show all the time. And they don't play around with it enough to make it interesting. I think in August I'll start Milo Murphy's Law. Until then, I'm done with this series. I think there were good episodes here. I enjoyed them, but just towards the end, they just kind of dropped the ball. It wasn't quite as bad as season 1, but it also wasn't entertaining enough for it to be okay. If that makes sense. I don't know. Because season 1, I mean, it wasn't that great, but you can tell they were trying to get their foot. But this is like, you got your foot in the stand, you know what you're going to do, and then you just kind of drop it, and you're kind of like, eh. It's kind of weird, but that's what happened, and I think the show, I'm glad the show ended, because I just feel like if this was a show that they wanted to write. Also, the Alka Files were just the worst episode of the series ever, honestly. Just such a boring episode with boring use of side characters who do not need to be there. And I thought that was like a failed pilot or like the beginning of a new series, but it wasn't. It was just a random episode that was really boring and ridiculously long. And just, again, focused on side characters that were actually characters deleted from the original pitch of Phineas and Ferb because they were useless to the show. And they were useless in that episode. And it just felt like the writers were trying too much and also not trying enough all at the same time. It's kind of weird to say that, but that's what kind of happened with this season. And I think it's still like never went like, oh, we're a bad show now. I just think it's a shame because I was excited to watch this after watching season 2, and then season 2 it never really reached the level of season 2. It just kind of dropped it, and it's not a bad show at all, but it never really reached its height. And I think because of the formulaic nature of the show, it just gets boring, right? Other shows, they can have formulaic nature, but not to the level this show is. It's the same episode every single time. Scooby-Doo is like that, but Scooby-Doo, even has learned over the years, hey, we got to play around with this. We can't do this. And also, every Scooby-Doo series is so short that it's only 40 episodes of that. This is like a multi-season show with a movie and a new special coming out on Disney Plus. So, kind of less leeway there. Like, comment, subscribe. Do all that.